Good Friday, March 27th, 1960. In Anchorage, Alaska, the late afternoon sun hangs low, casting a cold, golden light over a city winding down. It's 5:36 p.m. In the JCPenney on 4th Avenue, a teenage clerk daydreams, watching the second hand on the wall clock stutter forward. In a quiet house in the Turnagain Heights subdivision, a mother glances out the kitchen window at her children playing in the last of the light. The smell of dinner just beginning to fill the air. Down on the docks in the Port of Valdez, a longshoreman pulls his collar tight against the bite of the wind coming off the water. In Seward, a rail worker checks his watch, counting the minutes until his shift ends. For these people, and for thousands across the vast expanse of Alaska, it is just another Friday, a normal, forgettable moment. And then, it isn't. It begins not with a jolt, but with a deep, sickening roll, a vibration that comes up from the very center of the earth, a low groan that seems to emanate from the bones of the planet itself. The teenage clerk in pennies grabs a countertop as the floor beneath her begins to move, not back and forth, but in long, slow, undulating waves, like the deck of a ship in a heavy sea. The mother in Turnagain Heights watches in disbelief as her house begins to creak and sway, the water in the fish tank sloshing violently over the sides. The ground is turning to liquid. The first minute, the groan becomes a roar. Deep beneath Prince William Sound, a section of the Earth's crust the size of Connecticut has just snapped. A magnitude 9.2 megathrust earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in North American history, has been unleashed. In downtown Anchorage, the world turns to chaos. Power lines snap, showering the streets in a cascade of sparks. Storefronts along 4th Avenue, the city's vibrant heart, begin to crack and split open. Plate glass windows don't just shatter, they atomize, exploding into glittering dust that hangs in the cold air. Cars bounce on the bucking asphalt as if they were toys. The teenage clerk watches, paralyzed as the ceiling above her begins to sag, dust and debris raining down. The clock on the wall has stopped. Time is now measured in panicked heartbeats. The second minute. The rolling motion intensifies. In Turnagain Heights, the beautiful bluff-top homes are built on a layer of slick, unstable clay, bootlegger, cove clay. Now, saturated and shaken, it's failing. The mother screams for her children as a fissure, a dark, jagged wound, rips across her front yard. The ground is sliding, breaking apart in massive blocks, carrying houses, trees, and roads with it on a slow, inexorable journey. Toward the sea, she can only watch in horror as her neighbor's home tilts, groans, and then collapses into the growing chasm. The horizon itself seems to tilt, the world gone mad. The third minute. The sheer, grinding violence continues. In Seward, the rail worker is thrown from his feet as the tracks beside him twist into mangled ribbons of steel. The entire waterfront is collapsing into the bay. In Valdez, the longshoreman clings to a piling as the dock he was standing on disintegrates beneath him. The very seafloor has dropped 30 feet in an instant. The earth is not just shaking, it is tearing itself apart. The noise is a physical force constant, deafening cataclysm of grinding rock, splintering wood, and shrieking metal. It's a sound no one has ever heard before. A sound the human mind can barely process. The fourth minute. It feels like an hour. And the shaking doesn't stop. It changes. The violent lurching gives way to a sickening, rolling motion. The very ground beneath our feet, once solid, is turning to liquid. Aftershocks, like cruel afterthoughts, shudder through the already broken city. In the Bootlegger Cove area, the earth is literally pulling itself apart. You can see it happening in slow motion, great cracks appearing, stretching, the land spreading sideways as if it's breathing. Over in the Turnagain Heights neighborhood, it's a scene from a nightmare. The bluff overlooking the inlet is failing, and Tyrooses, once prized for their stunning views, begin a slow, terrifying slide towards the water. The ground peels away like an orange rind, taking homes, roads, and trees with it. People are scrambling, trying to get to stable ground, but there is none. A man leaps over a fissure that widens by the second, the other side moving away from him even as he lands. Downtown on 4th Avenue, the devastation is instantaneous. A whole city block, lined with businesses, drops 10 feet in a heartbeat. The street simply collapses into the earth, the pavement buckling like paper. A bus, caught in the middle of the street, lurches violently as the road unzips right beneath its wheels. Someone crawls from a doorway that's no longer square, the frame twisted into a parallelogram. The building groaning under stresses it was never designed to bear. The quake's fury isn't confined to Anchorage. All along the Alaskan coast, the story is the same. In Seward, the air is thick with the heavy, chemical smell of petroleum. Massive fuel tanks at the port have ruptured. The rail yard is a tangled mess of steel. Small fires are starting to flicker near the water, licking at spilled oil. A disaster within a disaster. In Valdez, the massive city dock groans under the strain. You can hear the sharp, cracking sound of wooden pilings snapping like twigs. The whole structure is tearing itself apart, but the real danger is unseen. Deep beneath the harbor's surface, the shaking has triggered a colossal submarine landslide, a mountain of mud and rock now careening down the underwater slope into narrow fjord-like bay of Whittier. The sound of the earthquake is amplified, echoing off the steep mountainsides. A deafening, continuous roar. In Kodiak, far out in the Gulf, warning sirens begin to wail. A shrill, lonely sound cutting through the cold air. The people there hear the alarm, but they don't yet understand the magnitude of what has just been set in motion. The earthquake has pushed the ocean. Across the coastline, a strange and ominous phenomenon begins. The sea is pulling back. In bays and inlets, the water level drops with unnatural speed, receding far beyond the lowest tide marks. Boats, moments ago floating peacefully, are now beached, keeling over on the slick, exposed mud of the seafloor. Confused sea life crabs, starfish, small fish are left flapping helplessly on the wet sand. Children, not understanding the danger, point at the strange sight, a bare expanse of ocean floor where there should be water. A silent, dreadful vacuum has been created. The sea has drawn a deep breath, and then it begins to return. The first sign is a sound, a low, distant thunder that seems to come from everywhere at once, a rumble that you feel in your bones more than you hear with your ears. Out on the horizon, across the now empty bay, a dark line appears. It's subtle at first, just a shadow on the water. But it's growing. With every heartbeat, that dark line rears higher, becoming a wall of black water, silent and unstoppable, gathering speed as it races toward the shore. In the absolute dark of Prince William Sound, the first waves hit not with a roar, but with a sickening, grinding crack. In Valdez, the entire waterfront simply vanished. One moment, men were scrambling on the docks. The next, the ground beneath their feet liquefied and slid into the bay. A massive wave, born from this underwater avalanche, erupted instantly. It wasn't a clean, curling breaker. It was a black, boiling surge of mud, splintered pilings, and ice. Dockworkers were swallowed whole. Survivors, gasping in the freezing water, clung to anything that floated, a piece of timber, a shattered crate as the port turned into a churning, debris-choked blender. Further west, in Seward, the apocalypse arrived on fire. The initial quake had ruptured massive oil storage tanks, spilling their contents into the harbor. When the first tsunami wave crashed in, it was pushing a slick of burning oil. Flames leaped across the water, riding the crest of the waves. The harbor became a maze of fire and water, with explosions ripping through tangled rail cars and fishing boats. People weren't just running from water. They were sprinting uphill, chased by black, burning waves that incinerated everything they touched. The air filled with the stench of oil and the shriek of twisting metal. In the narrow fjord leading to Whittier, the wave had nowhere to go but up. It was funneled, compressed, and transformed into a vertical wall of water that slammed into the tiny port and rail yard with the force of a battering ram. The two-story Buckner building, built to withstand anything, was inundated in seconds. The small boat harbor was obliterated. Lives were lost in the blink of an eye, crushed by the sheer, brute force of the sea being forced into a tight space. For the village of Chenega, nestled on an island cove, the warning was the earthquake itself. Just 4 minutes after the shaking stopped, the quiet of Good Friday was shattered. Survivors who had rushed outside saw the bay drain away, exposing the seabed in an unnatural, terrifying silence. Then, on the horizon, a dark line grew into a towering wall of water, estimated at over 70 feet high. There was no time for sirens, only instinct. People screamed, grabbing their children and sprinting for the highest ground they could find, a small hill behind the village where the cemetery lay. They clawed their way up the steep, snowy slope, hearing the monstrous roar behind them. From the top they watched in horror as their homes, their school, their church, their entire world was erased by the crushing wave. Then, a profound, keening silence fell, broken only by the cries of the grieving on a wind-swept hill. Hours passed, but the energy of the displaced ocean was not spent. It was racing south, a silent, invisible pulse of immense power. On Kodiak Island, the warning came late. Sirens finally blared through the night, and a frantic evacuation began. Headlights snaked up Pillar Mountain as residents fled the low-lying town. Then the waves arrived, a series of powerful surges that tore the docks from their moorings, snapped pilings like twigs, and tossed the multi-million-dollar king crab fleet into a tangled pile, stacking vessels like toys in a bathtub. The sound was a symphony of destruction. The deep bass drum of water hitting earth, the high-pitched shriek of tortured steel, and the constant, percussive drumming of thousands of logs from a nearby mill being slammed against the town. As the violence in Alaska settled into an eerie, tidal pulse, sea surging and retreating with an unnatural rhythm, the tsunami's leading edge continued its journey. It crossed the Gulf of Alaska, a wave train traveling at the speed of a jet in the sleepy coastal towns of British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. People were finishing late-night dinners, closing up shops, completely unaware of the approaching threat. Down the coast, in Crescent City, California, a police officer on patrol noticed something strange. He stood by the harbor, watching the tide behave in a way he'd never seen before. The water level was dropping, then rising, but gently, almost peacefully. It was unsettling, but not yet alarming. He had no way of knowing that these were just the preliminary ripples. He couldn't know that out, in the darkness. The fourth and most destructive wave was gathering its strength, bearing down on his unsuspecting city. As the Alaskan coast reeled in the darkness, the waves born from that colossal rupture began their silent high-speed journey south. Hundreds of miles away, along the coast of Northern California, the night was clear and calm. In Crescent City, a community nestled in a gentle curve of the Pacific, the first sign of trouble was almost deceptively mild. Just after midnight, the water in the harbor began to act strangely. It poured back, exposing the seafloor in an eerie, silent retreat, then surged back in, not as a towering wave, but as a fast-rising tide. Parked cars near the waterfront bobbed in the sudden flood, their headlights momentarily submerged before the water receded again, leaving them settled in the muck. A few curious onlookers crept closer to the shore, mesmerized by the ocean's bizarre behavior. It was unsettling, but it seemed survivable. A false calm settled in, but not everyone was fooled. A motel owner near the harbor, his face grim, began frantically stacking sandbags against his lobby doors, the rough burlap scraping his hands. A lone police cruiser drove block by block, its tires sloshing through the pooling seawater. This is the police. A tsunami warning is in effect. Evacuate to higher ground immediately. Get to high ground. The officer's voice blared from a loudspeaker, echoing through the quiet streets. Down at the docks, fishermen scrambled in the dim light, their hands fumbling with stiff, wet ropes, a desperate gamble to save their livelihoods. They untied their boats, hoping to ride out the surges in deeper water. But as the sea heaved again, stronger this time, many abandoned the effort, scrambling back onto the docks and running for their lives. For hours, this deadly rhythm continued. A surge, a retreat, a period of quiet, a rush of water. Then, in the deepest hours of the morning, the fourth wave came. This was the monster. The city's lights flickered and died, plunging the waterfront into absolute blackness. The harbor didn't just recede this time. It emptied completely. A vast, dark void. And then it returned. Not as a tide, but as a churning, debris-filled wall of water. It moved with the force of a liquid bulldozer, roaring over the breakwater and into the city. It tossed cars like toys, flipping them over and over. Buildings were ripped from their foundations. The sound of splintering wood and shattering glass, lost in the deafening roar of the ocean. People who had hesitated, who had thought the worst was over, were now running for their lives through knee-deep, then waist-deep, black water, dodging floating lumber and broken debris in the terrifying dark. While Crescent City fought its battle with the sea, Alaska remained shrouded in darkness and cold. Aftershocks continued to rattle the broken landscape, sending shivers of fresh fear through exhausted rescue crews. The freezing air bit through their wet clothes as they searched through the wreckage. In evacuation centers set up in schools and churches on high ground, families huddled together under the faces of parents etched with worry, trying to comfort crying children. Down in what was left of Seward, a lone firefighter stood staring at the harbor. It was still burning. Flames reflecting off the black, oil-slicked water, a hellish scene against the profound cold of the Alaskan night. As the first hint of dawn finally broke the eastern horizon, the true scale of the devastation was revealed. The morning light didn't bring relief. It brought clarity. It illuminated a world remade by violence. Inlets had been carved where none existed before. Entire neighborhoods were gone, replaced by vast, slick mud. Forests of steady spruce now stood in salt water, their roots drowned. In other areas, the quake had shoved the land itself upward. Rocky shorelines were lifted 30 feet into the air. A fisherman, his face a mask of disbelief, took a tentative step onto solid ground that only yesterday had been the bottom of the ocean. The night had not just destroyed, it had rewritten the map itself. And as the sun rose on this new, broken world, the survivors began to face the questions that would define the coming days. How much had been lost? Who had been lost? And what could this catastrophe teach a world that had, until now, felt so safe? The sun rises on a world remade. There is no looking back, only the stark reality of the present. As morning light spills over Alaska, the map itself has been violently redrawn. Entire coastlines have slumped, dropping several feet in an instant. The town of Portage is gone, submerged beneath the waves. Along the Turnagain Arm, a silent, ghostly forest now stands, its trees choked and killed by the sudden rush of salt water. It's a landscape born from a single, terrible night. But in other places, the earth has surged upwards. On islands in Prince William Sound, the old Tidlanza, high water marks from the day before, now stranded impossibly high on cliffs, a testament to the staggering force that lifted the very ground they stand on. Nearly 500 miles of fault line ruptured. The shaking, which felt like an eternity, lasted for about 4.5 minutes. The aftershocks will haunt the survivors for months to come. The true cost isn't measured in numbers, but in human stories. It's in the faces of families scanning lists in school gymnasiums, desperately searching for the names of loved ones. It's in the profound, hollowed-out silence of a village like Chenega, which lost 1/3 of its people to a single wave. It's in Anchorage, where entire city blocks simply slid away into the sea. And the devastation didn't stop at Alaska's borders. Harbors from Kodiak all the way down to Crescent City, California, were torn apart by the tsunami. This was a magnitude 9.2 megathrust earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in North America and the second most powerful in world history. And while the ground shaking was terrifying, the true killer was the water. Most of the 131 lives lost were taken by the series of massive waves that radiated across the Pacific, a silent, unstoppable force born from the upheaval of the seafloor. Yet, from this unimaginable ruin, a new chapter begins. The story of what comes next is one of resilience. The entire town of Valdez, recognizing the ground beneath it was dangerously unstable, picks up and moves, rebuilding 4 miles away on solid bedrock. The survivors of Chenega, after years of being scattered, eventually come together to establish a new home, a testament to their enduring spirit. The disaster becomes a catalyst for profound change. Alaska rewrites its building codes, pioneering construction that can withstand the planet's fury. Scientists, armed with new data, begin to map the Aleutian subduction zone with unprecedented detail, work that helps cement the modern theory of plate tectonics. And critically, from this tragedy, the Pacific Tsunami Warning System is creating a network of communication and preparedness that stretches across the entire ocean basin, designed to ensure that the lessons learned here, in the cold light of a March morning, are never forgotten. Imagine standing on a stretch of newly uplifted rock, looking out at the sea, or walking among the skeletal trunks of a drowned forest. You are standing on the Linda Precise, unerasable boundary between the world that was and the world that is now. A world forever changed, but one where the survivors chose not just to endure, but to rebuild, stronger. If you believe these stories of survival and innovation hold lessons that can help us today, please share this video. And for more true stories that have shaken our world, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.